Welcome to GK TechVerse. When you create a Spring Boot application, you will see these three lines. That is the entire entry point of a Spring Boot application. No XML, no servlet configuration, no connection pool setup, no component scan configuration. You run this and somehow a fully wired application context starts. A Tomcat launches on port number 8080. A connection pool is ready if you have a database dependency, and all your beans are registered. How that one annotation at Spring Boot application is doing an enormous amount of work behind the scenes. Today I'm going to show you exactly what it does step by step, from the annotation itself all the way down to how the JVM loads your beans. By the end, you will understand this deeply enough to explain it in a senior Java interview without hesitation. To understand auto configuration, you need to feel the pain it replaced. Before Spring Boot, every project needed this same boilerplate code, which is creating data source bean, transaction manager bean, JDBC template, entity manager factory, dispatcher servlet, and Jackson object mapper. So everything we have manually created the beans in every single project. Now Spring Boot makes life easy by its auto configuration. It replaced all manually defined beans creation by using auto configuration. By Spring Boot application is not a single annotation with special runtime magic. It is a composed annotation, a meta annotation that combines three separate annotations into one convenience wrapper. Let me show you the actual source code. Here is the Spring Boot application Java class file looks like. It has three main annotations. These three annotations, each one does a distinct job. Let me go through each one individually, because understanding all three is what makes everything else in this video click. Because Spring Boot configuration annotation is just like a configuration annotation with a Spring Boot specific marker. The at configuration tells Spring this class is a source of bean definitions. Any method annotated with bean in this class will produce a bean managed by the Spring container. The difference from plain configuration is that Spring Boot allows only one Spring Boot configuration in your application. It helps Spring Boot locate the primary configuration class during the test setup. Let's see the component scan. Component scan annotation tells Spring to scan the package of your main class and all sub packages, looking for classes annotated with component, service, repository, controller, and REST controller, and any other annotation that is itself annotated with component. Every class it finds gets registered as a bean. This is why your main class placement is matters. Let's see here. If you put my application.java, this is your Spring Boot application class file. In com.example, let's say this is the package. Everything under com.example gets scanned. If you accidentally put it in the root package, every class in your entire class path gets scanned. A performance disaster will happen. Now the third annotation is enable auto configuration. This is the heart of the Spring Boot. This is the one that makes Spring Boot is Spring Boot. Enable auto configuration tells Spring scan the class path for well-known libraries and automatically configure beans for them. If you have Tomcat on the class path, configure an embedded web server. If you have Icarus CP, configure a connection pool. If you have Jackson, configure an object mapper, all without a single line of configuration from you. The mechanism that makes this works is what we are going to spend most of this video. But first, let me show you the overview as a diagram. This is the top level view, one annotation, three responsibilities. And the most interesting one is enable auto configuration. Enable auto configuration has its own deep mechanism. Let's go inside that orange box. When Spring Boot starts, it needs to know which auto configuration classes exist. These classes live inside Spring Boot's own jars and third-party library jars. The discovery mechanism changed between Spring Boot version 2 and Spring Boot version 3. Let me cover both. In Spring Boot version 2, every jar that wants to provide auto configuration ships a file at a specific path. Spring Factories loader reads all spring.factories files from every jar on the class path at startup. You will see here in Spring Boot version 2 all the auto configuration classes. In Spring Boot version 3, move to a more structured file. One class per line. Cleaner, faster to parse and validate at build time with new auto configuration annotation. Every auto configuration class is just a configuration class with conditional annotations. Let me show you a simplified version of data source auto configuration. The data source auto configuration class that sets up your database connection pool automatically when you add Spring Boot starter data JPA to your pom.xml. If you see inside data source auto configuration Java class file, the two conditional annotations control everything, which is conditional on class checks whether a class exists on the class path, and conditional on missing bean checks whether you have already defined a bean of that type. If you have defined your own data source, maybe a custom multi-tenant data source, Spring Boot backs off and uses yours. This is the golden rule of auto configuration. It never overrides your explicit beans. Let me show you the picture. When Spring Boot application runs, the first step, it's load all your auto configuration candidates from your import files. What we discussed in Spring Boot 2, it will be in spring.factories. Spring Boot version 3, it will be in auto configuration imports. For each candidates class, which evaluate conditions. So the conditional on class required class on class path. If it is not identified, it will skip creating your beans. If class path identified, then it will check conditional on missing bean. If you already defined your own bean type, then it will also skip creating. If user is not defined any bean, let's say, then it will go to the conditional on property required to set in application properties. If it is not set, then it will skip. If the property is not required, all conditions pass, then it will register auto configuration beans into your application context. The entire intelligence of Spring Boot's auto configuration lives in conditional annotations. Let me go through every important one with a real code example. These come up constantly in interviews and in custom auto configuration writing. So condition on class, which activates if this class is on the class path or not. Conditional on missing bean, activate only if no bean of this type exists. Conditional on property, which activate if a property has a specific value. Conditional on web application, activates only in web context. So here is the code example. The conditional on class, conditional on missing bean, conditional on property, conditional web application. How we can use. Now we'll see this flow, how it works. So when Spring Boot starts, if user defined any data source bean, if yes, bean in configuration, so you uses data source, the auto configuration will be backs off. If user not defined any data source, then it will go to the data source class on class path, then skip data source auto configuration. If class path identified, then it reads Spring Boot data source from application properties. Then it will create the Hickory data source with configuration pool and registered as a data source bin in context. This is the complete flow of your auto configuration. Let's put everything together. Here is the complete sequence from Spring application.run to your app being ready to serve requests. Walk your interviewer through this and they know you understand Spring Boot at production level. When Spring Boot application bootstrap, the first step, it will create application context, and the next step, it will load your environment property files or YAML files. It start component scan, register your beans. It enable auto configuration, which reads your spring.factories or AutoConfiguration.imports based on your version. And next step, which evaluate add conditional on each AutoConfig class. Then it will register passing beans into your application context. Then it will refresh context, which instantiate all your singleton beans. Then post construct will call. Run command liner will start. And then your application ready event, which accepts your request. This is the complete Spring Boot application being ready to serve request. To debugging, you have to enable these two condition in property file to see which auto configs fired and which were skipped. So when you start your application, this debugging logging will show you the conditions evaluation report. You can also use the actuator. So when you enable the actuator, you can see all this report. So we can also control the auto configuration, like we can override the auto configuration. You have three ways to control auto configuration: override with your own bean, configure with properties, or exclude entirely. Let me close with 5 sentence version of everything we covered. Spring Boot application is 3 annotations. Component scan finds your beans. Spring Boot configuration makes your main class a config class, and enable auto configuration loads Spring Boot's intelligence defaults. Auto configuration classes live in jars registered in an important file. Each is a configuration class guaranteed by conditional annotations. Spring Boot reads them all, evaluates the condition against your class path and properties, and only register the ones that pass. And only when you haven't already defined a bean of the type yourself. The conditions report, you can see it at using actuator conditions, tells you exactly which auto configurations fired and why. You have three ways to control them: configure with properties, or override with your own bean, or exclude entirely. If this video helped you understand Spring Boot internals, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching GK TechVerse. Subscribe and keep upgrading your skills. See you in the next video.